And this is, of course, the legacy of Western colonialism and the Israeli regime. And
oh my God, holy shit. Oh, how many buzzwords can we throw in here? Western colonialism? Western colonialism is when you do airstrikes in Lebanon to assassinate senior leaders of a military group that is attacking you directly?
Palestine never existed except as a colonial
entity
created by the Brits. Lived for about 25 years.
See, no, I agree with Omar. This guy is cringe.
It was never a country. It was never.
Like, you can, like, steel man the argument for, like, Palestinians having a right to resist or whatever, but all the, like, they all target civilians. They all purposefully, these two words are important, purposefully target civilians.
By all means, if you want to do it your way, you have endless war in the Middle East.
Well, don't say it's my way, because don't say it's my way, because I see no plan which makes much sense.
Versus Palestinians, they don't want endless war when they continuously fire rockets into Israel in attempts to reclaim land that they lost in 1948. Like, really? If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to help with the algorithm, and consider sending a donation through YouTube Super Thanks to directly support the channel, and I'll make sure to reply.
Iran will respond, have no doubt about that, and the Israeli regime will be punished.
All right, we'll see about that one. I feel like Iran has not done a super great job at responding. I guess they launched 300 missiles, and like one of them landed in Israel because Saudi Arabia and Jordan and the U.S. shot them all down.
To antagonize Israel by proxy and to protect itself from its sworn enemy, the United States. That strategy has now been obliterated, along with Hezbollah's entire chain of command. Its leader, Hassan Nasrallah, was killed in an enormous strike in its headquarters in Beirut on Friday. An assassination that's been 18 years in the making. You didn't know, though, from some of the commentary this weekend, but Nasrallah was a terrorist.
I know, yeah. Iran's final warning.
Regime in Syria. He trained fighters in Hamas, as well as violent militias in Iraq and Yemen. He ordered strikes on Israel in the immediate aftermath of October the 7th. The world is a better place without him. But is it safer? Could a humiliated Iran decide that a nuclear bomb is now the only recourse for defense? Israel's just announced that it intends to launch a...
Didn't Iran literally said that they're finally willing to re-engage in negotiations after this. I think they said, yeah, at the UN a few days ago, Iran ready to resume nuclear negotiations immediately.
Incursion into Lebanon, and it could start as early as today. Meanwhile, 1 million Lebanese have already been displaced.
They did. I think they started doing ground raids today.
The entire population. The civilian death toll is rising. The war in Gaza rages on. Nasrallah has met a deservingly grim end, as the crisis in the Middle East may have only just begun. In a moment, I'll be speaking to the Iranian-American academic, Professor Mohammad Marandi, who's in Beirut. But first, returning to Uncensored to discuss the fallout, the son of Hamas's founder and former Palestinian militant, Mosab Hasan Yousef, and the Palestinian-American commentator, Omar Baddar. Well, welcome to both of you. Mossad, let me start with you. Your response to the killing of Hassan Nasrallah?
Well, you know, Hassan Nasrallah, his hands are stained with blood. Not only Jewish blood, but also Arab blood. He participated in the killing of hundreds of thousands of Syrians along the Russian forces and along Bashar al-Assad forces. This man has been...
I think we haven't gone over it yet, but I think one of the big reasons that Mossad was able to infiltrate into Hezbollah so easily was because Hezbollah was preoccupied with a lot of stuff going on in Syria, and that's why they were able to have like so many spies in Hezbollah that they were able to do like the insane pager attacks and like have intelligence to know where Nasrallah was when they bombed him, like, and all the other people in the chain of command that they bombed as well.
Stabilizing the security of the Middle East. And this was the time to put an end for this bullying and this blackmailing and this act of terror.
I mean, Omar Baddar, are you sorry that he's dead?
Piers, before I answer your question, I think there's something that your audience has to know about Mosab, who's on this program, if we can see if he's going to be able to control his temper and keep me from telling the audience this about him, is the fact that he calls every Muslim in the world untrustworthy, says you can't trust any Muslim, says everybody who identifies as Muslim is a predator, compares Muslims to animals, and the list goes on and on and on. And Piers, I think both of us know that if anybody engaged in that kind of bigotry towards, say, Jews, he would not give them airtime to appear on a program as if they're...
what he's saying could be true. I've not seen much from this guy before. I don't know.
Something to say. And on top of these deeply bigoted views that he holds, there's also the fact that he is simply just not a serious person. You know, puts on this really dumb, put-on, angry face and barks incredibly shallow slogans about wonderful being terrible and terrorist and so on. It's not really a real point of analysis. With that being at the forefront, I'll say that I think what Israel did in Lebanon and is doing is, don't take my word for it. Listen to what Israeli leaders themselves have said about the assassination.
Oh my God!
They said
the more quotes, more quotes.
To reach a diplomatic agreement with Hassan Nasrallah, but his insistence on ending the genocide in Gaza as a precondition to them reaching a diplomatic solution led them to choose to assassinate him and killing hundreds of Lebanese civilians in the process, incinerating entire apartment buildings. So in essence, Israel is choosing to incinerate Lebanese civilians to assassinate Nasrallah because they don't want peace in Gaza. That is the...
How many... Dude, I remember, like, looking into it, I'm pretty sure at most the strike that killed Nasrallah and 20 other, or I guess 19 other Hezbollah militants, I get killed like at most 10 civilians as well. So like they literally killed more Hezbollah operatives, including Nasrallah himself and there was one other like high level like senior Hezbollah leader for like at like 10 civilians in that strike. Like really, dude?
And the fact that you can look at this and still not figure out what moral policy should be and who's to blame for this kind of path of escalation that we're on, to me is completely mind-boggling. It is obvious that Israel is out of control. It's on a war path.
All right, look, you've launched a substantive ad hominem attack on your other panelist, which is entirely your prerogative, and he can respond. But you also failed to answer my simple question. Are you sorry he's dead?
I look at it in terms of the impact on civilians, which in this case, I think made things infinitely more dangerous. We're seeing this onslaught. So yes,
are you kidding? It's really the only thing you care about? Like if any civilians die at all, that's bad? Are we going down that road? Oh my God.
My question. Do you personally feel sorry that he is dead, the head of Hezbollah?
No, look.
I mean, what is Piers Morgan supposed to do about ad hominem? Is he supposed to like fucking kick them out of the Zoom room or something?
But that's the thing. I don't have individual personal feelings about players here. For me, what I'm concerned about is ultimately the impact on innocent people. Absolutely. Look, Nasrallah, if you want me to talk about his legacy, that's a really easy thing to do. He was a hero throughout the entire Arab world for having driven Israel out of South Lebanon in 2000, for delivering Israel its first defeat in 2006, and then his record, had a major blemish on it when he intervened in the Syrian civil war for geopolitical reasons on the side of the government, and that upset a lot of Syrians who are essentially repressed and brutalized by the Syrian government to see that he has intervened in order to help them maintain power.
At least he can
but that
admit
was more a geopolitical decision more than it is a moral decision. And so he has a mixed record. And a lot of people like him and a lot of people don't. But ultimately, there's no question about the fact that he is a major figure in the region that has a significant fan base, not just within Lebanon, but throughout the entire region. And that taking this major escalatory
I guess
step,
he could do that.
We've had the alternative. We've had the option of a ceasefire. And Israel chose not to take that and chose the path of escalation. And taking out a major figure is obviously pushing us towards further catastrophe. And it's materializing right now in Lebanon as we're watching Israeli terrorism decimate the civilian population in all parts of Lebanon.
Israeli terrorism in Lebanon, yep.
Mosab, first of all, your response to the personal attack that was launched on you at the start of that.
I'm not going to comment on that. I know who I am. I know what I am. I'm not a commentator on the Middle Eastern
conflict. I think it's by your own admission.
I lived in the conflict. I'm an eyewitness. I lived half of my life in what's so-called Palestinian society, and I spent the other half of my life with the Jewish community. When I speak on the authority of experience that is representing both cultures. One culture is a culture of death that has been sacrificing children for political and financial gain. And Omar is coming here to the West, carrying the false Palestinian identity, hiding behind a couple of Western values, trying to manipulate and deceive American and Western audience by showing somebody like Hassan Nasrallah and Ayatollah and Sinwar and the rest of the proxy leaders. These people are reckless. They started the war on October 7, and Israel had the right to defend itself. And Hezbollah has been launching missiles.
Oh no, he said the meme.
They just killed 12 children as the whole world is watching on a playground.
Don't you know that was actually an IDF Iron Dome misfire
of the Lebanese community. And no one leashed Hassan Nasrallah. How many times Omar and Mustafa's and Muhammad's complained or protested against Hezbollah aggression, taking advantage of Israel bleeding in the south?
I'm sorry.
And he was totally mistaken. Hassan Nasrallah today, this is his punishment. Israel is legitimate when I stand for Israel. Why do I stand for Israel? Because Israel is the most legitimate ethnic group in the region, with evidence, overwhelming evidence to relationship to that land. Yeah. Omar,
are we? Oh my God, are you kidding me? Why are we pivoting to fucking who has the most legitimate claim to the land based on like ethnic character? Who the fuck? I don't. Oh my God, this conversation always seems so cringe to me whenever you start bringing up like the fucking ethnic connection to the land. I don't give a fuck.
They're trying for the past 1400 years to delegitimize and annihilate the Jewish people from that land. And they hate it so much that Israel is showing resilience and strength. You ask Omar if he's sad. Omar is mourning. Hassan Nasrallah is his hero. So let me tell Omar and his likes. Listen, you cannot rewrite history. And when I speak, I don't only speak on my own authority, I speak on the authority of the universe. That Iran and all its proxies and the Muslim world behind it,
no, this is a very serious conversation.
Back off, there's going to be only the language of fire. And you can sit here in the West pretending to value the Western ethics.
Okay, I agree with Omar. This guy's cringe.
With a false identity and your religion. And your entire population.
Let me call a timeout here. Omar, you can respond to this. I'm going to just go to the Professor Marandi for a moment to get his response to this. I will come back to you. What I would say, though, is you did choose to start the whole debate with a quite lengthy personal attack on Mosab. It's hardly surprising he would return the favor.
Merited.
I personally,
not only is Piers Morgan, he like says he doesn't allow it, but like, he's milking it. He's milking it so much. He wants the drama. He wants it.
To try and talk about the issues.
Openly bigoted. No,
I did put the kind of it shows you the idea.
The fact that he openly says that all Muslims are evil in comparison to animals and engages in all kinds of the worst kind of bigotry imaginable, and him just inventing nonsense and just leveling it at me. By the way, I'm a secular agnostic. I'm pretty open about that. I've written about it. I don't know what he's talking about with the Mustafas and Muhammads and whatever. Just you can see the bigotry in his engagement about the Arab culture of death. In one breath, he says openly that the entire Arab world is made up of 300 million clowns. That is a direct quote of his. And on the other, he's feigning concern for Arabs who die because of Hezbollah. I mean, just the entire thing is just a silly charade. He's not a serious human being, and you can see the utter bigotry in every word that comes out of his mouth.
All right,
and the fact that he has no serious analysis to offer.
Okay, I want to come back. I want to come back to both of you and talk seriously about what is a very serious situation. It's been reported tonight.
Okay,
that
let's
Israel
see.
is planning to launch
Let's see if they can do it.
A limited ground incursion into Lebanon, perhaps as early as tonight. This is obviously a massively important moment in this conflict. So let's try and talk about that when I come back. I know I just want to bring in the Professor Mohammad Marandi. He's been on Uncensored before. He's currently in Beirut. Professor, thank you for joining me. First of all, do you mind me asking why you're in Beirut?
When the Israeli regime carried out a major atrocity on the first day of bombing, killing well over 500 people, I decided to come here, and I thought it would be best to be here.
What is he referring to there?
Be a voice for the
Was that one airstrike, or was that a
and,
series of
actually,
multiple
I was
airstrikes?
in the building where I was staying,
Beirut, 500.
when the attack occurred on Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah and the 6 towers, residential towers that were all destroyed, killing hundreds of people. It was about 1,000 meters away. I know that neighborhood well because during my sabbatical in Lebanon in 2011 and 12, I live pretty close, and I walk there and I drive through there. And the Israelis massacred hundreds of people. And in the West, you don't stress that. I think there were 83 missiles, each 1 ton. And it's unbelievable how immoral the Western elite has become, that they're gloating over this attack. After a year of genocide and Holocaust in Gaza, and now slaughtering people.
Oh my God, the Holocaust!
Beirut day and night. After the attack on Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, hours later, they said they're going to strike 3 other places, and they struck 12 or 13 in southern Beirut. People were terrorized. No one knows how many people have died. And this is, of course, the legacy of Western colonialism and the Israeli regime.
Oh my God, holy shit. How many buzzwords can we throw in here? Western colonialism? Western colonialism is when you do airstrikes in Lebanon to assassinate senior leaders of a military group that is attacking you directly. That's colonialism now. 500 people. You to talk about 500 people. Is the question is how many civilians were killed? I think I don't know. Lebanon's health ministry raised the toll to 492, including 35 children. I don't know if these are. I don't know if these are all civilians or not. Even if they were all civilians, you'd have to either prove that these attacks are either indiscriminate or disproportionate, considering that these are like airstrikes, and like Israel seems to have really good intelligence on where all the Hezbollah leaders are. They've been super successful with assassinations so far. I would assume that these aren't indiscriminate and disproportionate. I would have to know. You'd have to know how many of these were civilians versus, or either how many of these are civilians or militants, or if these are all civilians, and how many people were also militants in the strikes. And this is like a whole like series of airstrikes. You'd have to do it for every single one. But like,
there's a paradox here. On the one hand, they are your chosen people.
Also, like, like Hezbollah operates out of civilian areas as well. Like, Hamas was partially inspired by the way Hezbollah operates when they were doing how to operate. Dude, it's carpet bombing. They just got lucky hitting all the Hezbollah. I know, yeah. Like,
You're on the one.
No, you don't understand. They were aiming for the civilians. They just they accidentally killed the entire Hezbollah chain of command. They're such an incompetent military that like they're aiming for the civilians, and they just like accidentally end up hitting Nasrallah. Like,
on the other hand, you're a secular Western political order. We don't know what to believe when it comes to the West. On the one hand, the Israelis who are from Europe and other parts of the region and
Trump, welcome to the stream of the press for 36.
They can slaughter people, as they've done in Lebanon before Hezbollah was created. Hezbollah was created as a result of the Israeli occupation of Lebanon and the taking of this very same city that I'm in right now, Beirut. It was created as a result of the occupation. And they drove the Israeli regime out. And the Israeli regime, during the occupation in 1982, they and their allied militias, they slaughtered in a refugee camp pretty close to where I am right now. They slaughtered 4,000 people within 36 hours, up to 4,000 Palestinians and Lebanese. So this genocidal behavior of the Israeli regime began far before Hezbollah was ever created.
Okay, listen, I gave you a long chance there to respond because I'm genuinely interested in what you have to say, and I mean that. Hezbollah, as you know, along with Hamas, they are wedded to the destruction of Israel. And Hezbollah's response to October 7th
he's going to reject
was to immediately unleash a lot of rockets at Israel in solidarity with what Hamas had done in Gaza. If you're the Israeli government and you've just been on the receiving end of one of the worst terror attacks of modern times, with 1,200 people killed, with nearly 7,000 more wounded, in an utterly horrific and barbaric series of attacks from up to 3,000 people coming over your border, and then the response in the north of your border is for Hezbollah to unleash a lot of rockets at you, and then to carry on doing that for the next calendar year, at what point did you not think that Israel's going to respond? And whether you agree with what they've done or not, the military success, and I'll phrase that exactly as I've just phrased it, the military success of what they've achieved against Hezbollah in the last 10 days by the pager attacks on 3,000 members of Hezbollah, by taking out now the leader.
Don't you mean the indiscriminate terror attack?
A mass leader in Lebanon. You cannot dispute the military success. And what I'm curious about with Iran is where is the response? You know, Iran helped create Hezbollah, helped train Hezbollah at the start. Iran has funded Hamas, funded the Houthis. Israel has now, you know, if you look at this purely objectively from the outside, from a military point of view, is having a lot of success against Iran-backed groups. Where is Iran? Why is it not responding? Many people think it's because actually Iran doesn't have either the ability to take on Israel or the desire to.
First of all, I think that you have to keep in mind that, from my perspective, the Israeli regime cannot respond legitimately because the regime is illegitimate.
Oh my God.
Hezbollah
the entire regime is illegitimate? So this guy is also just dedicated to the destruction of Israel then? Is that not like...
an ethno-supremacism to be dismantled.
Oh,
in other words,
there we
something
go.
that in the West is very impossible to imagine. All human beings in Palestine...
Well, he wants Israel destroyed. He wants the destruction of Israel. That's literally what
they want the destruction of this...
I feel like no one knows Israel-Palestine, including Arabs and Jews.
Yeah,
I know.
And it has been doing so for 76 years. The very same people who carried out the Nakba, they raped and murdered and expelled people. Most of the people who are in Gaza are refugees. This is not a legitimate regime.
Okay, but going back to my question, Professor, why is Iran not doing anything? The world is watching.
It's a Schrodinger's refugee. Half of people in Gaza and children, but also the other half are refugees from 1948. Do you think the year 2100 they're still going to be arguing with each other? Yeah, probably, dude.
And the world is furious.
Yeah, first of all, Iran will respond, have no doubt about that, and the Israeli regime will be punished. Second of all, Iran
I have some doubts about that.
Support the axis of resistance. And Israel has not had any military success. The pagers was a terrorist attack, and it was actually...
Yep, there we go. He said it. Yep.
On the West
We got it.
Because these
it was attacking the West.
Devices from now on, those things that have been produced in the West or countries that are allied to the West, their supplies chains
Oh
have
my
been
God.
compromised. And the West is doing nothing about it.
I'm pretty sure the New York Times reported that this was a company that New York Times Israel pagers, or Israel made the pagers. This was a company literally like set up by fucking the Israeli government did not tamper with Hezbollah, but devices had exploded, Defense and Intelligence says, and manufactured them as a part of an elaborate ruse. Wasn't this literally like a company specifically set up to sell this equipment to Hezbollah? You know, if you're not a like designated terrorist organization, you know, I don't think you have anything to worry about, brother. I don't think you have to be worried about accidentally buying Mossad manufactured fucking pagers and walkie-talkies. Also, these are pagers. No one's fucking buying pagers. No one in the West is buying pagers.
And I think lots of people are going to have second thoughts about buying any electronic devices from any of these Western countries or countries affiliated to the West. So the Israeli regime is doing no services to the West by carrying out these terror attacks.
It's interesting that you phrase it. It's interesting you phrase it as a terror attack, given that given that Hezbollah is identified by America and other countries as a terrorist group, and given that it was very specific in its targeting.
Yeah, Piers Morgan is mentioning it's very specific in its targeting. Yeah, they're only going to
extraordinarily precise. It is obviously horrific that civilians were killed in the process, but the vast majority of people who were damaged or wounded or killed by the pager attacks were members of Hezbollah, who are, according to America and Israel, a terror group. So that's how they would categorize it. That's not an act of terror. That would be, under the laws of combat, they would say they are taking on combatants, and that's perfectly lawful and legitimate. That is their argument.
Here's if it was pagers and walkie-talkies or cell phones that were in the United States. I think you'd have American...
Oh my God! Yeah, I mean, if the pagers were always... I don't understand how he thinks this comparison is at all legitimate. Like, if the United States was attacking Israel, or like name like any country that we're attacking, like what I guess we're not in Afghanistan anymore. What country are we attacking right now? I don't know. If we were attacking X country, and X country sold pagers to only our military, then like, yeah, that would probably be that would probably be... I wouldn't call that a terror attack. No, that's a lot. We're lawful targets on their like IHL for that. Like what?
Over countries who they would claim were behind it. So let's put aside the hypocrisy.
But just to be clear, you don't think that Israel has any military right to respond to Hezbollah firing rockets at Israel?
Israel does not have an ethno-supremacist regime. Apartheid South Africa had never had the right to exist, and Israel never had the right to exist. The only existence...
So it has no right to defend itself against rocket attacks?
But it has no right to exist. When it came into...
at least he bites that bullet. You know, I'm very glad that he at least bites that bullet. Like, they have no right to exist, therefore they should just fucking, like, surrender.
By displacing...
Top tier comment you missed? No, I read it. What do you mean?
people in Manchester.
I mean, I read it. I don't think I read it out loud.
Its existence. I'm just telling you, given it does exist, does it have no right to defend itself?
Here's, this is what you fail to comprehend. As long as you have a master race, as long as you have a hierarchy of race, as long as you have one race that considers itself superior to others, there's not going to be any peace. That's just a fact of life. Whether it's in the United States or whether it's in Palestine or whether it's in South Africa, there's not going to be peace. For Iran, the dismantling, and for Hezbollah, the dismantling, or you can call it the destruction, the dismantling of this system has to happen. And this is something that you don't accept, which is fine. You support racism.
No, I don't. No. Hang on, don't misquote me. Don't misquote me. I don't dispute for a moment that is the intention of Hezbollah, the Houthis, Hamas, all funded by Iran. I have no doubt that Iran would like to see the destruction and removal of Israel. I get all that. I'm just saying that but hang on. Yeah. I'm just saying that right now it looks like Hamas is losing, Hezbollah is losing, the Houthis are on the run, and their big backer Iran seems to have disappeared. And I'm looking at this thinking, this is odd. Where is their big backer? Where is Iran, who's been sponsoring and funding all this terror? Where are they when the real action starts? And many people think, like I said, it's because Iran either lacks the capability or the will to try and respond to what's happened.
That's what you want people to think.
No, it's what people are saying.
Well, that's what people are saying, and that is
true. People do be saying that.
Which is fine, but then you're going to...
I mean, I'm pretty sure in Gaza, Israel's had more problems. I mean, one, they have hostages, which complicates who they can target. I'm pretty sure the reporting was that Sinwar literally had 22 hostages like handcuffed to him, which obviously makes it hard to target him. They have hostages. I don't know. I'm pretty sure the U.S. said they basically achieved all they can do in Gaza, and they should probably gonna accept the ceasefire at this point, because right now it's just a game of whack-a-mole of fighting Hamas wherever they reconstitute and pop up, while Israel is essentially occupying most of the Gaza Strip. Yeah. In Lebanon, they've been quite a bit more successful so far, at least. Although, a prolonged occupation of Lebanon, I don't think it's gone well for them in the past. So we'll see.
Ultimately, Nasrallah is not retreating. The Israeli regime and the Americans have failed in the Red Sea. The Nasrallah survived 7 years of genocidal.
I don't know about the Red Sea, but
backed by the U.S. and your government against their people. They defeated the people who carried out the genocidal war. Do you think a couple of airstrikes from the Israeli regime is going to change anything? They will continue to enforce, as they say, Ansarullah in Yemen.
A couple of airstrikes is a little bit of downplaying of literally killed the leader and all of the senior command, the entire top chain of command has been destroyed, and all their communication has been destroyed. And, a lot of these airstrikes also targeted rocket facilities. So a lot of their actual military capabilities been destroyed. These aren't he's downplaying it quite a bit when he says just a couple of airstrikes. So you think Gaza would be best at this point? Lebanon is waiting game for more
terror organizations. They're the ones that are funding this genocide. They're the ones giving the bombs, the bunker busters to go and bomb homes and civilian towers in Gaza. And whenever they carried out, the Western media will say Hamas strongholds, terror centers, Hezbollah strongholds. Why? Because they want to justify these terror attacks. No, the terrorists are
exactly what I want to do. Wait, no, the reason that's not what I want to do. The reason is because I'm paid.
Paris and elsewhere.
Paid off by Israel, by the Mossad.
And that your countries are better than ours, whatever you do has justification. No, the terrorists are the ones who are supporting the Israeli regime and who have been carrying out terror for a year. Hamas, Islamic Jihad, they are the native population that have been brutalized for 76 years, and Hezbollah has been trying to help them. They voluntarily entered this battle last year, Hezbollah, to draw the Israeli army away from Gaza so they would be able to kill less people. They are heroes, contrary to what you say.
I mean, at least he admits that they voluntarily entered the war. That's one way to say that they started it.
And your government has been helping the Israeli regime to slaughter. They've been giving them intelligence, political support, financial support, ammunition, and of course the weapons they have to, and most importantly, the intelligence. All of the Five Eyes and Western intelligence and the AWACS that fly and the drones that fly alongside the Mediterranean, both for Gaza and Lebanon, they're helping the Israeli regime carry out its genocide.
Isn't the truth about this that there's a massive geopolitical battle of will going on, where you have Iran, you have Russia, you have China dancing somewhere in the middle, and on the other side you have the West, and there's a jostling for power and position and geography. You see it in Ukraine, you see it now in the Middle East.
Yeah, I know.
Iran is sitting there in a really interesting position where it's seeing Saudi Arabia nudging ever closer to normalizing relations with Israel. And if that was to happen, after all the other Middle Eastern countries that have done that, it's pretty well game over for Iran's ability to destroy Israel and to destroy this normalization process. That's what Iran is terrified of. And that's why Iran has been so aggressively funding these groups, which I would categorize as terrorist groups. You categorize them as freedom fighters, whatever you want to call them. They've been funded and armed by Iran, who right now is looking completely impotent in the eyes of the world. Now, you say they're going to respond. The last time they responded to an assassination, they fired a few hundred rockets that all got taken out by Israel's Iron Dome. It wasn't exactly a show of strength or might. And I'm not saying this to goad Iran into doing anything. I'm just saying it is notable that Iran has done nothing. And it could be that Iran itself right now is feeling very isolated and feels that maybe the net is closing in on itself.
Yes, you're very inconsistent in what you said. Right now, you're saying on the one hand, it's Iran, Russia, and sort of China, and now you're saying Iran is completely isolated and afraid. Which one is it? Let's be real here. This is not about geopolitics. That is always a part of everything. But this is about a moral issue. But you cannot comprehend that your governments are morally inferior than others. Your governments are terror states that are supporting these terrorists.
Oh my God, true. Yep, they're inferior to Hezbollah and Hamas. I can't, dude. Yep.
No, I've made no comment about that. I mean, I was the editor of the Daily. Well, to be clear, I was editor of the Daily Mirror newspaper when we opposed the British government's war in Iraq, for example. Right? So, when it comes to my,
I'm pretty sure we looked at the relative risk ratio of like Israel and Lebanon. At least the last attack was pretty high. Israel-Lebanon War 2006, 103. This basically means in the Israel-Lebanon War in 2006, militants were essentially 103 times more likely to die than civilians.
my moral view of these things, it may not be as simple as you think.
I acknowledge that.
U.S. is a terrorist state because he was forced to get vaccines.
Our first discussion, and I will not refrain from doing so.
Welcome
again.
to the stream.
But your government carried out the dirty war in Syria. We know Jake Sullivan. He wrote an email to Hillary Clinton on February the 12th, 2012, that Al-Qaeda is on our side in Syria, a decade after 9/11.
Well, what about what Hezbollah did in Syria at the behest of Assad, a dictator? What about killing hundreds of thousands of Muslims? Did you have a problem with that?
No, your government's killed hundreds of thousands of people because your government...
Hezbollah did too. With
no, you.
No, you don't think that's true? You don't think it's true?
Come on, Piers.
Come on.
Your government...
Are you denying that Hezbollah got into bed with Assad and killed hundreds of thousands of people?
You don't want me to respond because you know that this is going to be problematic for you. Your intelligence agency in England facilitated the travel of young people to Syria to fight and to join ISIS. The same ISIS that, according to the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency document of 2012, regional countries were deciding to create a Salafist entity between...
Hezbollah and ISIS are not on the same side, right? Hasn't Hezbollah fought ISIS before? I would like... Hezbollah leader Nasrallah defeated ISIS, protected Lebanon. Yeah, okay, well, I mean, we're seeing the pro-Hezbollah people mentioning it, so it must be true. They're not. I don't know why he's mentioning this. Yeah, they were on opposite sides of that conflict.
Like Syria and Iraq. And according to General Michael Flynn in an interview on Al Jazeera of all places, he said that the United States supported this. The United States supported the rise of ISIS. And carrying a leaked audio, and all of this is online, he said we allowed ISIS to advance on Damascus. So your governments are responsible for Syria. Your governments are responsible for Libya. Remember, we came, we saw, we died. This was a sovereign country that your government destroyed. Your government supported the genocide in Yemen, and now your government is supporting the genocide in Gaza. And the people of this region...
Would you categorize... Okay, I hear you, and you're perfectly entitled to your view. But would you agree that when you have a charter which proclaims you want the destruction of Israel, which has 7 million people living in it, that is genocide?
He doesn't care because he wants the destruction of Israel. He's already got on record. He doesn't think Israel has a right to exist. He wants the destruction of Israel. He's already said it a million times, Pierce.
No one is talking about killing Jews. That's a lie. In fact, many...
Well, if you destroy Israel, you destroy millions of Jewish people.
And fortunately, the resistance in Southern Africa and their supporters across the world destroyed the apartheid regime in South Africa, but they didn't kill off the white population. Young Jews in the United States are standing up to this apartheid and racist and genocidal regime today. And the fact is that the Israeli regime has exposed itself to the world. They have done more harm to Jews than anyone else. They're the anti-Semites because they're carrying out this genocide in the name of Jews, and young Jews in your country and in the United States are saying not in my name. So they're the anti-Semites. They're the Europeans who came here, and now Netanyahu calls Palestinians Amalek. And you know what that means in biblical terms. It was the Israeli president who said that there are no innocents in Gaza.
I'm really worried about Hezbollah genociding ISIS.
Or a terror minister who said we're going to shut off the medicine and the water and the food, and we're going to starve the children.
Yep, the complete siege. Yeah, they're going to starve the children.
And that's what they did. They weren't shocking.
I agree with you. And the fact
I'm pretty sure what he's referring to here is that after Hamas invaded and broke down the border wall, they did say that. Oh wow, they twisted out like that one. We destroy Israel are killing Jews, super realistic. Yeah, I know. Yeah, well, don't you know? You get rid of the ethno state, the evil ethno state, and every problem is solved. What he's referring to, like the complete siege thing, is like, well, Hezbollah kind of broke down the border between Gaza and Israel, and they didn't let anything into Gaza until they secured the border. because, you know, they literally had Hamas operatives in their fucking country, so they didn't want to keep letting stuff into Gaza while the border was open. But eventually, once they secured it, they started letting some trucks into the like the south. They didn't let stuff into the north. However, they did. I mean, they warned people to evacuate from the north. And pretty soon after the war started, so
they were able to do that.
Genocide, and they're still doing it. Now they want to expand it to Lebanon.
Also, I think I need to look more into this, so don't like take anything I say for as like truth here, because I haven't looked into it. I think part of the issue is, like, with the trucks coming into Gaza, is that they're sort of undercounting it. Trucks Gaza, because I think they started restricting the use of they started restricting the like import of dual use materials, and not just food trucks. I think if you count just food trucks, just like food and aid trucks, and not like construction trucks and stuff, I don't even know if it has decreased substantially since prior to the war. 100, 200. This is September. Wait, that's 24. Okay.
Don't disagree with you about the occupation charge,
I don't
because
think
clearly
go
only an
back.
occupying force or country can have the ability to turn on the tap of energy and water and so on. I agree with you.
So that makes it a criminal regime that your government is backing to the hill. So what does that make your government? It makes it a terror regime.
Okay.
So instead of calling our governments and groups in this region that are indigenous, and all they want is Palestinians to be treated as equal human beings and to bring down this corrupt system, instead of calling them the terrorists, you should call those people who are the terrorists.
Okay. All I would say is I believe all Palestinians should have a
On a truck thing, we need 600 daily trucks to prevent famine. Just to put it in perspective, how comical this claim is, each food truck on average carries 13.15 metric tons of food, assuming high weight losses packaging, with the average kilogram of such food containing 3,400 calories. High caloric density makes up the majority of food. For population 2.2 million, 500 and 600 daily trucks would amount to 11,000. Thanks for the follow, Whippy Goldberg Bug. You've been here. Thank you. 11,000 to 14,000 calories per day per person. Even if it's a half the aid was lost due to distribution problems, that's still 5,000 to 7,000 calories per day. Keep in mind the average figure includes 37. God damn, I thought Avi had something written up on the undercounting of trucks.
Any Israeli or anybody else. I completely believe that. Yeah, but I do not agree with your categorization of these groups as resistance. They are terror groups, but we'll have to disagree.
They are heroes, and Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah was a hero.
Okay, he's your hero. To me, he was a despicable terrorist, but we will have to...
Oh, dear
Professor
God.
Marandi, thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, let's go back to the panel. I mean, Mosab, that is the Iranian view. He's entitled to have that view. It's interesting for my viewers, I think, to hear that view. But what is your response?
Look, the Islamic Revolution.
Okay, before we'll read more. I need to make a note on this. For the months of May, there are major discrepancies between the number of trucks reported entering Gaza between whatever the fuck this place is, Kodaga Online, UNRWA, and the UN. They all gave different figures from each other. By far the greatest data discrepancy since the beginning of the war. The values from May 1st to May 30th. According to Korea, 6,000 trucks entered. According to the UN, 2,700 trucks entered. Avi's vegan, I'm aware. According to UNRWA, only 1,400 trucks entered. Why are all three sources giving different numbers? UNRWA is easy to explain. Since May 6th, a whole lot of views here. Since May 6th, they have simply stopped counting almost all trucks. It's because UNRWA only counts trucks entering from Rafah, now closed to Egyptian policies. In Kerem Shalom, all trucks entering from all other crossings are simply not counted. Additionally, all private sector trucks are not counted. Their presence to count trucks, even at the Kerem Shalom, is also questionable at this point. The UN OSHA counts trucks entering through crossings other than Rafah and Kerem Shalom, but they do not count any private sector trucks. Correcting for these factors brings back to normal expected discrepancies. 2,856 trucks were private sector trucks. Adding this figure to the UN OSHA figures brings the estimate up to 5,000 trucks. If we are accounting for the data lag, about 450 truck worth of items sitting on the Gaza side in the border still not logged by UNRWA as the 1st of June, the figure gets to 6,000 trucks, which is well within the normal discrepancy between UNRWA and Korea. I don't know. sometimes the more I look into stuff, the more I think the criticisms are unfair. Like, I used to be like relatively like lenient on some of the blockade stuff, but like now I don't even know if they're really restricting aid. I think there's undercounts going on, but we were like airdropping food, and like we probably shouldn't have had to do that if they just let more fucking trucks in, but whatever.
Leaders, Ayatollah, and before him, Ruh Allah, they have invested some 40 to 50 years into their proxies.
Someone's selling like Korean doctors
and other proxies in the region. Now what they see the collapse of their aggression, the collapse and the failure of many
that'd be useful with
years of investment. What happened to Hezbollah is shocking to the core. The entire Islamists around the world are seeing the collapse of one of the most funded, equipped military force in the Middle East. And Ayatollah is not far from Israel's reach. He understands this. This is why he retreated after the assassination of Haniya. And by the way, I want to ask just a question. Okay? Who killed the Iranian president to begin with? The fact that Israel did not announce that did not mean that Israel does not have any hands in it. So,
is he doing the? Listen. I'm fairly certain that helicopter crash was probably just a regular helicopter crash. Now, the more recent helicopter crash, where I think multiple like Iranian officials died, that was probably, Eli Copter, Mossad agent Eli Copter might have had something to do with that one.
Ayatollah and the other Hamas leaders in Qatar who think that they are immune to retaliation, they're totally mistaken. I said this from day one, and that's based on a personal experience with the Israeli intelligence of more than 10 years. That all Hamas leaders will be eliminated with no exception. Hezbollah, that was surprising to me how fast they actually collapsed. But the Iranian regime is a lot more vulnerable. And the Iranian nuclear program is ought to be destroyed. It's just a matter of time. There is no immunity for these people who have been destabilizing the region, taking advantage of the chaos they create. Then we have the clowns here, what so-called experts coming here in the West, spreading false narrative of occupation and Palestine. And what I say, Palestine never existed except as a colonial entity created by the Brits. Lived for about 25 years.
See, no, I agree with Omar. This guy is cringe.
It was never a country. It was never a nation. And today,
I mean, he's right, but it doesn't necessarily. It was never. I want to say it was never a nation. It was never a fully sovereign state. But like, I want to say that necessarily precludes there being an occupation. I think clearly what's going on in the West Bank is probably best described as an occupation. Thanks for the follow.
Say Israel is occupying force. I say occupying what? Palestine never existed.
But at work right now, can we connect in a Discord so I can watch the stream later?
How can you occupy something
that... Exclamation point Discord in the chat if you're not a bot.
Wait.
I'm going to let Omar respond.
They keep going. They keep. He will have his time. He will have his time.
Right.
Now we are talking about a false narrative. We are talking about a false narrative.
You've had a chance to have your time.
Okay, Omar, you respond now.
You were here. You're hearing Mosab here talking about how occupation is all fake and made up and it's whatever. But it's incredible that when you look at what international law says, what the UN says, what the UN General Assembly says, what UN resolutions say in the Security Council, there is a complete and total consensus on the fact that Israel is
Palestine never really existed, buddy. I mean, like, it was, again, I obviously agree it was never a fully sovereign state, but like how else what should we describe like the West Bank, like what's happening in the West Bank? I would say like clearly like it's not Israeli sovereign territory. There's clearly a like group of people that have a national identity here that all like seem to have like share a history and some shared like Palestinian identity. I think clearly that territory is being occupied. I mean, that I don't necessarily know that if that occupation is illegal. I don't think I would necessarily describe it as an illegal occupation. I think occupations could be lawfully created in self-defense, and then Israel now has a right to negotiate the end of that occupation. But yeah,
illegally occupying the West Bank and Gaza and East Jerusalem. The International Court of Justice has come out with an opinion making clear that this occupation is illegal and has to end. So while Mosab wants to pretend that this is something that Palestinians manufactured because he has nothing of substance really to say, the reality is just so obvious and so blatant that you don't even know how to address such a bizarre and ridiculous argument that this is something that Palestinians invented. Palestinians have been there for literally thousands of years. They are the natural continuation of people who have lived in that land for a very, very long time. And yes, it's true, Palestine was never an independent UN member, for example, as an independent country. But by the same token, Native Americans in the United States were never also did not have a state that is a member of the United Nations. It doesn't change the fact that they were living on their own land and that colonists came and take over and drove them off of that land and created a new state on top of them. So Israel was created at the expense of Palestinians. And while you might talk about this militant group or that militant group or what their charter may say about the destruction of Israel, in the case of Israel, it is active policy that we're watching is to destroy Palestine. This isn't theoretical. We're not talking about what their charter says. We're talking about what Israel's doing. And Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. It is building illegal settlements in the West Bank, using unspeakable levels of violence against the Palestinian civilians there, and confining them to smaller and smaller areas. We are watching the destruction of Palestine before our eyes in a way that the entire international human rights community and international law says is completely illegitimate and criminal, and our reaction is to fund it and maybe occasionally criticize it instead of standing up to it in a really meaningful sense.
I don't know if he has any good understanding of international law. He seems to just be quoting he seems to just be appealing to the authority of the ICJ, and I think the ICJ is probably not. I don't put much stock in the ICJ at this point. And I think the media, so many people misreport on what the ICJ says, like when they ordered the halting of the offense in Rafah. That was the opinion of only one judge, and it was only the South African judge, who happens to be from, South Africa, the very same country bringing the case against Israel. Every other judge said that they're allowed to continue their offensive in Rafah. They only must stop the part that could bring about the destruction of the Palestinian people in whole or in part. There was another thing the plausible genocide thing. People don't they ruled on the plausibility of rights. The former ICJ had to come out and say this. We didn't rule that genocide was plausible. We ruled on the plausibility of rights. So Palestinians have a plausible right to be protected from genocide. And South Africa has a plausible right to bring a case against Israel for this stuff.
Omar, what should Israel have done on October the 8th after the attack the day before?
In a theoretical world in which I was the Israeli leader on October 8th, what I would do is take on the podium, acknowledge the fact that we've created an unspeakable situation in which violence is inevitable, and I would offer to instantly end the occupation of the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem, to apply international law and respect Palestinian human rights, in exchange for every person on October 7th who engaged in acts of violence against Israeli civilians to be brought before court and put on trial for war crimes.
And who would do that?
But that's out of the question.
Who would turn them over?
Fighters to court.
Yeah, you don't need the entire 40,000 in the same sense that you don't need every last member of the Israeli military to be brought before war crimes because the Israeli military engages in war crimes. There is a path forward, and that's the thing. The reason
you're seriously suggesting that Israel should not have responded. But you're seriously suggesting that Israel should not have responded to one of the worst terror attacks in history in any military way whatsoever.
You have to be consistent about this, Piers. If we're expecting...
obviously it wasn't a... I shouldn't even call it a ruling. It obviously wasn't a full ruling, but yeah.
Palestinians do not respond in any militant sense to literally decades of Israeli atrocities and war crimes against Palestinians. Why does it only work one way? Why do we say that Israel must respond militarily, but Palestinians are never said to need to respond militarily to decades of Israeli occupation and war crimes? Why is that double standard there?
Because the argument, as you know, from the other side, is if you go back to 1948, that there have been a series of escalations in those 75 years, with blame being attached to both sides, small things happening, which then trigger outbreaks of war, and it's gone on now for 75 years, and at the center...
It's not even... you can steel man the argument for Palestinians having a right to resist or whatever, but all they all target civilians. They all purposefully, these two words are important, purposefully target civilians. They're not engaging in just military resistance. They're also doing fucking terrorism, purposely targeting civilians. And also you can do the meme of if Israel put down their arms, there'd be no Israel, but if Palestinians put down their arms, there'd be a state. Clearly, I think a peaceful movement would probably have a better chance of success than any militant movement for the Palestinians. It seems like in the past, whenever there's been a genuinely or relatively peaceful Arab leader, like in Egypt, Israel's had to contend with that, and they've been forced to make peace with that country because Hamas is sending rockets at civilians. Same with Hezbollah in North Israel. Yeah.
Of it is an ongoing.
But also, I don't even know who does he expect to turn over the people who committed war crimes for Hamas? What? You're we're gonna end the occupation in exchange for putting the fucking people on trial for war crime. Is Hamas just gonna turn them over? Do you expect Hamas to do that?
But here's my point: the center of it is an ongoing dispute about territory and land. I get all that, but ultimately,
you expect Sinwar to turn himself in? What? He's the leader of Hamas at this point.
You cannot have a situation where on one day,
I know, yeah, they don't give an F about a quarter.
that volume of people are massacred and wounded, 7,000 people wounded, and that Israel just does nothing. It was so far and away beyond anything anyone had seen in that conflict for 75 years in one day. Of course they were going to respond. Of course Hamas knew. Of course Hamas knew that would be what Israel would do. So they knew what would happen to their own people, and they didn't care. Iran knew what the response would be, and obviously.
Oh, and also, I mean, you can play this argument on both sides, but like, you know, you do the like, you don't have the right to self-defense from self-defense. So, you know, it's not like if Russia invades Ukraine and occupies Ukraine's territory, and then like the Ukrainians rise up, like Russia can't like claim self-defense against the people who rose up in Ukraine or whatever, because there's no self-defense of self-defense, right? You can make that argument. Both sides will claim that they're the ones doing the real self-defense, you know. So, you know, it's hard to play that game, but like, yeah. There's no self-defense of self-defense. So if you're on the Israeli side, you'll say, well, you know, Israel's doing its actions in self-defense. Palestinians can't do its self-defense of that self-defense. If you're on the Palestinian side, you'll say Palestinians are the one doing the self-defense, and Israel can't defend itself because that would be self-defense in response to self-defense. Both sides play that game.
Hezbollah's reaction was not to show a modicum of sympathy for any of the people killed. It was to launch a barrage of rockets in sympathy with Hamas, the terrorists who perpetrated it. And they've carried on doing that for a whole year, and they've displaced 65, 70,000 Israelis from the north of Israel. And at some point, of course, Israel is going to respond. Now, what part of what I just said is factually inaccurate?
Yeah, I think the entire framing that Israel is responding is at the fundamental core of what's wrong.
I'm not denying historical. The reason I prefaced it by saying, I said there have been 75 years of flare-ups and wars and everything, and you can argue about all the history as long as you want. What you can't argue with is the scale of what happened on October the 7th was so horrific. It was always going to get a massive response.
It was a major attack.
Sorry?
Yeah. No, here's the thing, Piers. This is not about tracing it back as a tit for tat. Well, they did this before and those people did this before. There is a status quo. It's not equal sides that are living on both sides of a border that are perfectly living fine and equal, and then one of them chooses to launch an attack against the other. You have a fundamental status quo in which one people rules another, in which Israelis
we always do the power thing and never the who's targeting civilians thing. Like you can play the same game. That's true. There aren't two equal sides here. One side is purposefully targeting civilians. The other side accidentally kills civilians while defending themselves from the first people. Like, yes.
Every day, decade after decade, are free and live in complete freedom and democracy and so on. And you have Palestinians in Gaza who are living in a cage.
Oh, complete freedom and democracy. I thought Israel wasn't a democracy. I thought it was an evil apartheid state. That's a fake democracy, Bubby, and they don't have a free press. What's up, Bubby? Welcome back.
Allowed to go in and out, have no freedom,
Hamas were given governmental power.
Have no prospect.
Oh, so there's like 40,000 crossing a month. The framing here is just so bad. It's like 40,000 crossings a month or whatever.
Given governmental power from 2005, and all it did was spend billions of dollars building a huge underground tunnel network so it can continue to wage terror against Israel.
What do you mean, no, buddy?
That money. When you can argue to the cows come home, but that's obviously what they did, and they did it at the expense of their people. So yeah, you can claim with great cause, by the way, that Israel's had an occupation which had never been permitted in the first place. But you can also not deny that in 2005 they pulled out of Gaza and let Hamas take charge, and this is where we got.
Yeah, but they blockade, which is still an occupation somehow.
That's the correct framing. No, they withdrew in 2005 out of Gaza and then put Gaza under siege and made it a cage and allowed Hamas to govern this cage internally. They can be the prison wardens of Palestinian prisoners. That's not meaningful governance. And then you can have a serious debate about how Hamas spent its money. You can say that maybe what they should have done is make this cage a little bit more pleasant for Palestinians to live in, and instead they chose to...
I mean, like, yeah, like, unironically, like, yes, like, if they have the ability to do that, they should have done that. And also, like, the biggest indictment here is going to be the failure in passive precautions, right? Like, defenders are required to take passive precautions to separate military installations from civilians. Hamas ruled the Gaza Strip. Hamas was the prison warden of Gaza for 16 years, and they didn't do that at all. They could have very easily sectioned off a part of the Gaza Strip for a military installation, but they didn't do that. Instead, they spent millions of dollars building tunnels. Like,
devote their resources into
I wonder who had Palestinians in a cage before them. Yeah, I know. Like,
military infrastructure.
They were occupied by Egypt before that. Jordan was occupied, or the West Bank was occupied by Jordan. Although obviously, the conditions in the West Bank when it was occupied by Jordan were not nearly as bad as when occupied by Israel. But
I'm not a fan of Hamas. I don't support them. I oppose their rule.
Does anyone talk about this guy? He's literally Muslim Brotherhood mouthpiece. Yeah, I don't. They got like the two worst people to debate this, brother.
Society. But at the end of the day, when you're talking about a captive population that Israel has just put in a cage and left to rot, it is natural that people are going to be drawn to more extremist and violent ideologies in order to break to that fundamental injustice.
But do you accept
that's really the reality.
Do you accept that you have the three H's, the Houthis, Hamas, Hezbollah, all prescribed terror groups to many nations around the world, all of them funded and resourced by Iran. And do you accept that at some point, when you have that kind of concentrated collection of groups that are wedded to the destruction of Israel, Israel is going to do what it can to try and save itself, right? You can argue about the history as much as you want, but they're going to do that. And what is inarguable, it seems to me right now, what I put to Professor Marandi, is that from a pure military perspective, it would appear that Israel is having enormous success now in taking on Hamas, Hezbollah, now the Houthis, and Iran has disappeared. Iran is doing nothing to defend these groups that it's funded for so long. Now, maybe they will. But at the moment, it looks like either they don't have the ability to properly get involved, or they don't have the will. And that could be an enormous transformative revelation for that whole region, couldn't it?
Yeah, two things on what you just said, Piers. I think the fundamental reality is that Israel is insisting on a situation of dominance. Again, this is not a status quo in which Israel is just another country in the region.
He's not affected his friends who were the Turkish flotilla into these literally fundamentalists. I didn't know that.
And Israel has an option. It is true that this has triggered a reaction in the region in which
Ira Moss, I'd be fighting in fighting military struggle. I'd be building tunnels too. You realize that's a war crime, right? Like you're you're intentionally not separating military infrastructure from civilians. That's a failure in passive precautions. That's like Article 49 of Additional Protocol 2 or something. I think it's something like that. I can find it. Sure, but you're still not going to win against the IDF otherwise. I mean, it doesn't seem like they're winning against the IDF now. But if you want to, here it is. Okay, where's the article it's in? I don't know. We can find it. Hey, you want to win in either case. But like you're doing the same thing that like that people criticize people like intuition pump so heavily about like pro-Israel people for. You're justifying a war crime. You're justifying a war crime. You're justifying the killing of children. That's like unironically like what you're doing in this case. But like there is a feasibility aspect to it, right? There is a feasibility aspect to passive precautions. But again, Hamas was the ruling party in the Gaza Strip for 16 years. They could have sectioned off a military infrastructure for military use, but instead they spent millions of dollars building tunnels.
And that Iran is indulging those militant groups. They're not proxies of Iran, just for clarity. Nasrallah in Yemen are a genuine Yemeni group. Hezbollah in Lebanon is a genuine Lebanese movement. Its roots are in Lebanon. The same with Hamas in the Palestinian area.
Hezbollah was initially created by members of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard who trained them. 1,500 members. Yeah. Originally trained Hezbollah to get them going. Of course they're a proxy.
Yes, Iran is supporting them in order to get them going. But members of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, who was just assassinated, was born and raised in Lebanon. To me, proxy implies that they're not independent actors. They're just tools that Iran sent into the region.
Article 57.
Exactly what I think Hezbollah's
these are actors in the region. No. They are actors in the region that are defiant towards Israeli regional dominance, and because they have a common cause with Iran, Iran is arming and training them. That's the dynamic. And yes, Israel has an option. They can start behaving within the bounds of international law and reach a peace agreement with the people around them and with Palestinians that would then suck all the energy away from these fanatical groups that want to keep fighting, or Israel can continue massacring Palestinians and taking their land and insisting on pursuing a military strategy against new and emerging military threats. By all means, if you want to do it your way, you have endless war in the Middle East.
Well, don't say it's my way, because I see no plan which makes much
versus
sense.
Palestinians, they don't want endless war when they continuously fight Iraq and Israel in attempts to reclaim land that they lost in 1948. Like, really?
To me about what Israel intends to do.
Really? They're the only side that wants endless war here?
Gaza after this, or indeed what its ultimate plan is for Lebanon. So this is not my way. I'm just telling you what it looks like from the outside, which it looks like Israel is now on the ascendance against its traditional enemies over there, and is having a lot of military success. Let me go back to Mosab. Yeah, you actually predicted that Nasrallah was about to be assassinated. You posted on September the 23rd on X 4 days before. Let's gamble. Anyone who predicts the day and date of Hassan Nasrallah's assassination will get an autographed copy of my new book, The Last Prophet, $777 in cash. On what day and date Hassan Nasrallah is scheduled to meet Allah? I mean, you were right. So putting your predictive hat on again, what do you think is now going to happen? If, as is being reported widely now, Israel launches what they call a limited ground incursion into Lebanon, where is this all going to end?
Well, the eyes are not only on Lebanon. The most important target and the priority number one is the Iranian nuclear program. This is priority number one. We cannot afford allowing any Islamic entity to have mass destruction weapon because they are not showing responsibility. They have been bullying, they have been intimidating other religions and ethnic groups. The Islamic
seems like Israel's been pretty successful at taking out Iranian nuclear scientists so far.
The Palestine as a device. to express their anti-Semitism.
And we had
To
Stuxnet.
inflict pain on the Jewish people after they suffered a genocide on October 7, which, by the way, by the definition, the only genocide was committed is on October 7. What's happening in Gaza is not a genocide. It's collateral damage. It's the use of human shields that
true.
has been justified by Omar and
Oh, he
many
doesn't like that
advocates
word. He
on
doesn't like that
Palestine
word.
who think
He's shaking
that
his
the use of
head.
human shields and kidnapping people and raping and looting and the calls for annihilating of a human race.
There you go. Israel was caught raping people.
Of resistance. This is their. You shut up. You shut up. It's my turn now.
Oh, are you kidding me? Oh.
Yeah,
So now,
by all means, yeah.
the thing
Go
is,
on with your
they
unhinged rant. Go for it.
invert the narrative. They invert the narrative. Every time they suffer a defeat, they call it a genocide. And we say, no, there is a big difference between defeat and a genocide. You started this war and you killed Jewish people on October 7 by the name of Allah, not by the name of Palestine. Then the entire Muslim world backed Hamas in a global offensive against the Jewish people, a small minority that is resilient to time, with overwhelming evidence in relationship to the land, the only indigenous people to the land who did not oppose allowing the Arabs to stay in the state of Israel. This is why we have 2 million Arabs in Israel. So now, to accuse Israel of ethnic cleansing,
Israel was
to
established by
accuse
ethnic
Israel of
cleansing of
genocide,
Palestinians. That's how
while
they
you
became
are
a
the
Jewish state.
perpetrator. You are the perpetrator. Why are you interrupting me? I listened to your false narrative all the way until the end.
No,
So this is the time to sit down and listen.
Carry on.
Sit
No, you're
down
right.
and
Carry
listen.
on. Carry on with your
So
nonsense.
this
Go
is
ahead.
your mastery, inverting the narrative. This is what you do best. You are the perpetrator, then suddenly you become the victim. And I tell you something, Iran will be punished. Everyone who's standing behind terrorism, Hamas is a terrorist organization designated as a terrorist organization in the United States. You cannot be American and supportive of Hamas. You say you're not a big fan of Hamas,
True. Deport all the Hamas deporters, just like Daddy Trump wants to do.
but you are a big fan of Hassan Nasrallah. Hassan Nasrallah killed many Americans, hundreds of Americans. Hassan Nasrallah is a criminal, Ayatollah is a criminal, and whether you come by the name of Allah or by the name of religion, it doesn't matter. Justice must be delivered. What happened on October 7 is not about how many Jews were killed. We cannot agree to that. Nobody in the free world would agree on Hamas aggression that was documented by their own cameras. And of course, we will have to go after them. Otherwise, if I to listen to you, Earth will be corrupted. If I to just follow your logic that the war started before in 1948. The war started 1400 years ago. Your mosque in Jerusalem.
Oh,
is
now
built
we're
on the top of
going.
the Jewish temple. You go below the
It's
mosque.
so cringe. Oh, I hate this conversation. Why does he keep bringing it back to 1400 years ago?
And we have all the evidence. You don't have the right to delegitimize Israel as a nation.
Back to Middle
It's
Easternism.
against
Let me
facts,
tell you
it's against the
something.
Bible, it's against history. You cannot rewrite the history
It's against
by
the
keep
Bible?
inverting
Yes.
and
Great
spreading
point.
false narrative.
Okay. Listen,
This is you're going nowhere.
All right,
Israel
Mossab,
is
thank
going
you.
nowhere.
Okay.
And you need to have the legitimacy first.
Okay.
You must have the
Thank you, Mossab.
legitimacy as a
All right,
Palestinian.
just
You need to
Omar,
prove
finally
to
and
the
very
world that
quickly,
you are legitimate
I'm going to
first
wrap this up, guys.
before you
I'm
try
going
to
to
delegitimize
I just want to
Israel.
ask Omar the same question I asked Mossab, which is, if Israel launches a ground offensive into Lebanon, what do you think is going to happen here?
Yeah, just very
Hezbollah
quickly. I wanna say
too.
that Mosab just all he does is level ridiculous, baseless, personal accusations about what I think and what I do, and it's just, again, not a serious argument. Israel was established at the expense of Palestinians. In order to create a Jewish state, they had to ethnically cleanse hundreds of thousands of Palestinians out of their homes in order to manufacture that demographic reality. That's just a fact. Now in Lebanon, I think
You are
this ground
false.
invasion of Lebanon is going to be
You're
a
not a
disaster.
You are
I think
false.
you're okay, can you please keep your mouth just zipped while I'm talking, since you made a big deal about you having time? Now, when you talk about what's happening in Lebanon, I think this ground invasion is going to be a disaster for the entire region. I think they're going to try to turn South Lebanon into another Gaza. I think they're going to engage in a massive, unspeakable scale of violence. And I think
Really?
that even though Hezbollah's leadership has been decapitated, there's still plenty of soldiers on the ground who are far better trained than Hamas fighters. And so we are in for an absolutely bloody mess that increases the chances of it developing into a major regional war very, very significantly and seriously. The level of atrocities that we're about to witness in Lebanon is going to be beyond the horror that we saw in Gaza. And again, the fact that nobody's restraining this fanatical Israeli government.
Really? So yeah, I know they're gonna turn South Lebanon into an open air prison as well.
From this path of death and destruction is an
I think his definition of more atrocious is probably just more. There's just more dead people. It's just more dead civilians. It's probably not even just civilians. It's probably just more dead people. He's probably as soon as we get to 42,000 dead Lebanese, he's probably just gonna say it's word. Thanks for the 5 bits twice. Goddamn, welcome back for that. Welcome back. Thanks for that one, buddy. That's probably his definition of worse.
extremely disturbing development that is really pushing the entire region.
Just count the dead bodies, and whichever pile is higher, that's worse.
Okay, I've got to leave.
That's the moral character of or the moral analysis that he does.
Thank you both very much. I understand passions run high on this issue, but I appreciate you both coming together and debating this, and we'll see what happens. I hope you're wrong. Omar, I really do. But I fear that things could get a lot nastier before they get better, but I hope not. Thank you both very much indeed.
If you want to chat with me live, sub here or go to Nonfon420 on Twitch or Kick via the links below. Once again, please like and sub to help with the algorithm, and consider sending a donation through YouTube Super Thanks to directly support me, and I'll make sure to reply to any question you ask. See you guys next time.